Hello, Nathan Baird from the Indy Star.
Sam King from the Journal-Courier.
We are in the Ohio Stadium press box. We're going to get a kind of brief recap of Ohio State's 45-0 win over Purdue. I suppose we're actually recapping Purdue's 45-0 loss to Ohio State.
Right.
You guys care about the Boilermakers in this case. First, we want to talk about basketball because there has been an update today. Purdue beat Northern Kentucky 72-50 on Friday night. We were there, got a little bit of sleep, drove over here this morning for this. You all probably know Daniel Jacobsen suffered some sort of lower right leg injury 1 minute into that game. Matt Painter said he'd have scans today. They had a scan this morning that identified something. I don't know the extent of that yet. Purdue, I don't think, knows the extent of that yet. We expect he will miss time. We don't know how much time. Purdue's going to have another scan done on Sunday to determine probably the timeline of how long Jacobsen will be out. But it certainly doesn't sound like good news in the short term. And we're going to talk to Matt Painter. We're scheduled to talk to Matt Painter on Sunday afternoon. So I think we'll probably have a more definitive update later in the afternoon. But not a great start for Purdue, which now has to find, it does have depth at center, but there's a reason why Jacobsen was starting and maybe some other guys weren't, because Matt Painter hasn't seen the consistency he wants from those other guys.
Right. And you hate to speculate about a situation like this, but like you said, the severity of it, the way that he went down and instantly grabbed his leg and came back, first of all, went down the tunnel, came back later on crutches and never returned in a game that, was competitive for a good portion of that game, would speak that, you would expect that there's no reason to rush him back, even if he is capable of playing, which is kind of why last night, what I wrote about after the game was this might be Wilberg's time to shine as a guy he came in with this class with Fletcher Lawyer, with Braden Smith. He redshirted. He's been beating and banging on Zach Edey. And, Edey told me how not prepared Edey for every game the last 2 years, just having a guy that size going against you every day. But at the same time, you would assume it made Wilberg a better player. And then he went off in the summer, kind of did some 3-on-3 stuff in his homeland of Sweden. And he said that kind of helped him develop quicker instincts and things of that sort, because it's a different style of game. Now you're going to need him. So you hope that all of that stuff materializes. And then as he gets more minutes in game time, I thought he was actually, the season opener, I didn't think he was that bad. He just couldn't make free throws.
Yeah.
And then against Northern Kentucky, I thought he looked pretty good at times. And I think he was plus 27 in 17 minutes. So pretty impressive.
That was the best plus minus last night, I think, was Wilberg. And, Matt Painter had, in a conversation I had with him the other day, had specifically said that he thought Wilberg did good things in that opener, even if I think he was 1 of 6 on free throws. So that obviously can't continue. But the other things he's doing and the way he's rebounding, I think especially, would be pretty critical. So now you look to him to presumably go back in the starting lineup. He did start the opener against Creighton. I think they were probably hesitant to put Jacobsen in there against Ryan Kalkbrenner right from the beginning, like the very first seconds he's on the floor. So they gave Berg that opportunity. He had foul trouble. So he's going to have to play better than that the next time he comes up against one of those opponents. However, you also do still have Raleigh Burgess, who sort of forced his way into not redshirting this year.
Which
partially
now is a great decision.
Well, yeah, potentially. Yeah. Partially, because of the way he played, and partially, frankly, because maybe someone like Caleb First had not authoritatively pushed him out of the picture. And now someone like Caleb First, who has been a starter in the past, can maybe sort of, reestablish his worth. I don't know, worth isn't the right word, the value that he can bring to this team, play with some of that, veteran presence and give them a boost. We don't know if this is going to be a matter of games for Daniel Jacobsen. We don't know if it's going to be a matter of several weeks for Daniel Jacobsen. Like we said, the extent of this will be more apparent on Sunday, but it definitely does. And then the other thing we should mention too is we still really haven't seen them put Draycoff and Wren at the 5 and Cam Heide or whoever at the 4, which is the matchup they've been talking about,
right.
and put them up against another opposing big and use that sort of take the quickness advantage rather than the height advantage that they get to use sometimes. So that's still something that's on the board too. They have other front court options.
I would be very interested to see, especially when Alabama comes to Mackey next Friday and you get a more athletic team with some speed. Maybe how Purdue handles that if Jacobsen's not able to go.
Yeah, I mean, you've got they play Yale on Monday, and Yale and a decent team. I think a decent Ivy League program, right? I mean, they've done some things, but then Alabama, you're talking about a Final Four team from last year, a team that is expected to be one of the 5 to 10 worst, best teams in the country this year. That's a big game. And they had started, I think you saw the promise of what they could do with Jacobsen, especially from a rim protection standpoint. He blocked 3 shots himself in that opener against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Are you impressed that I got that the first time this time? I think I've screwed it up every time. I mean, that was, he is the rim protection on this team. And I don't know if any of those other guys we've mentioned are really can step up and be rim protectors the same way and block shots and disrupt shots the same way. But they do have other things that they can do that in the aggregate can still be a very productive 40 minutes at center.
Right. Last night after the game, I asked Matt Painter kind of along the lines, I don't think I asked it the way I anticipated asking it, but how you have all of these guys, Burgess, Kaufman, Berg, First, they all have something different that maybe collectively can be a good thing. And when you're practicing and you have all these different guys who have different skill sets, how that can kind of benefit the team. So, there's flexibility there. You don't have Zach Edey, who's going to play 38 minutes and just stand under the basket and become a wall that nobody's going to be able to shoot layups against you. We've seen a lot of layups scored against Purdue in the first 2 games, but I think that you can get some great production as a whole from this unit. Even if Wilberg becomes the starter and Jacobsen's not playing, he's not going to play 30 minutes. It's going to be probably a separation where there's 20 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 5 minutes between a couple guys, whatever you have to do. But I would definitely expect that, especially with the way that he's played the first 2 games, that Berg would get a bulk of those minutes, or at least get the first crack at that.
But some of those layups are not happening because there isn't somebody under the basket. They're happening because of other breakdowns and half-court defense, ball screens and stuff. They've got to get better at that sort of thing. And this puts the pressure on them to be better at those sorts of things because, again, you won't have that tree down there, the 7'4" guy under the basket. So look for AnyStar.com, JCOnline.com for more updates on that situation on Sunday. Let's talk football briefly. This game was I think it got down to 37-point favorite for Ohio State before this game kicked off. It ends up being a 45-point game, but it's the second shutout in the last 3 games. In the 3 games that that Purdue has played against teams that right now would make the college football playoff, they've been outscored, 146-7. So 66-7 Notre Dame, 35-0 Oregon, 45-0 today. And kind of what I wrote in my insider for IndyStar.com that's posted right now. You can only judge a program by its own standard. Purdue's standard is not to come over and beat Ohio State all the time. They've had this weird bugaboo where they've won more against Ohio State than other teams had, or they did for a stretch. Lately, that hasn't been the case. It's what is now 3 or 4 wins in a row now for Ohio State, and all of them have been pretty comfortable. But you can look back through Jeff Brom's tenure. You can even look at Darrell Hazel's tenure. When Purdue goes up against top 5 teams, yeah, sometimes it gets pasted. Like Darrell Hazel, they had an Ohio State team that they lost to 56-0. Then they also went to Michigan State one year and lost 24-21 when Michigan State was the Big Ten champion and going to the college football playoff. And right now, this team, it's bad enough that it's not punching its own weight. Like it's not beating the teams in its weight class. But the Purdue standard is that you will at least give a fight to teams like this. And right now, whenever they get on the field against a team like this, they look outclassed. They look like they are a different tier of the sport. And that was true against Notre Dame, I guess, most prominently. You still noticed it against Oregon. You wonder what that game would have been if Oregon didn't have to come cross country on a short week and play that game. Like that could have been worse than 35-0. Today, I mean, it's 14-0 late in the first half, but it never really felt like Purdue was going to make a stand in this game and take a real shot in this game. And it quickly got out of hand in the second half. And it's just, this is part of the process. You can't say that Purdue has really turn things around until it gets into a game like this, and people need to be paying attention in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and if you're Purdue and you come in and you have any hope of Purdue wasn't winning this game, they could have played flawless and still lost. But if it came in here, played a clean game, and you lose 35-21 or something like that, or even 35-14, something like that, you feel like, okay, with the way the season has gone, you can accept that. And instead, Purdue has a punt blocked inside its own 10. that turns into a touchdown 4 plays later. Purdue drives down the field, gets to the 3, throws a jump ball into the corner of the end zone, which was a low probability catch, and then elects to go for a field goal for the guaranteed points, which, I understand the thinking there. You're going to be down 7-3, but at least you have some early momentum. And you miss a 21-yard field goal. And from there, it just snowballed because it felt like even though it was clear one team had more talent than the other, Purdue was doing some good things and at least looked competitive against, what is one of the favorites to win the national championship this year.
Ohio State's really, really good.
Yeah.
Ohio State's really good. The guy that was out there, the receiver that was like shredding Purdue today, is a true freshman, Jeremiah Smith. Might be the best receiver in the country, and he just walked in.
Somebody tweeted at me and said, "Can number 2 play defense?" And I said, to be fair, Jeremiah Smith might be the best receiver in college football.
Yeah, I do think Nyland Green needs to play better, but that's true that Jeremiah Smith is really, really talented. And at the same time, like it just felt like another game where so what have been the big issues for Purdue the last few weeks, really all season? There have been, I think, 2 things that have been like chronic issues, more than just like the broader things of they don't score points and they give up too many big plays, but it's tackling. Tackling has been just really bad this year, and that goes back to the Notre Dame game at least. And then penalties have been an issue all year, even going back to the Indiana State game.
Yeah,
and
their pre-snap penalties.
Yeah, the pre-snap stuff, just shooting themselves in the foot. And today, 0 penalties. And I think you could probably even say, like, how many times did you feel like Ohio State, which again is one of the best collections of skill talent in the country, how many times did they really like break a tackle, or did Purdue like blow a tackle? There were a few times it happened, but as it will over the course, you're not going to play perfect. You're not going to shut them down completely. But this was, I thought, the best tackling performance by Purdue maybe in weeks. And still, that never really gets rewarded because you only get to the red zone one time. You get there and it gets down to 4th and goal, and you decide to kick the field goal because that would have made it 7-3. And I think Ryan Walters was like, well, we need to get some kind of positive. We can't not get points. And this is just a chip shot, right? And
it's an extra point, basically.
It's an extra point, and it goes wide right. And Spencer Porath has not missed an extra point all year and still goes in and just shanks it. And from that point on, pretty soon it's 14-0. Still 14-0. And Purdue has the ball in its hand at the Ohio State 40 going into the 2-minute timeout. So you're still like 2 first downs away from being back in field goal range. You can get points on the board. You can maybe take a little bit of momentum into halftime. But what happens? They stall out. They give the ball back to on downs to Ohio State. Ohio State drives for a touchdown.
Yeah.
It's just, and now it's 21-0.
And what happened there that probably frustrated me, and I tried to ask Hudson Carter this after the game, but I didn't really reference the point that I was talking about. He took a sack on 4th down and short, and in that situation, just throw it up in the air. It's like a punt if they intercept it, but you got to give somebody a chance to make a play. You cannot take a sack there, and instead Ohio State gets the ball near midfield, and a minute and a half later is in the end zone.
I mean, listen, Ohio State is very good defensively. They've got a good defensive front. They've got a veteran, very skilled defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles, who dials up pressure from all angles and is a tough mind to go up against. And I've talked to the guy. He's basically said, like, his goal in life is to confuse the hell out of opposing quarterbacks and offensive coordinators. Like, he loves it. He thrives on it. And that's the way they attack. But that coming in, first of all, there's plenty of film out there on Jim Knowles. You played him last year, right? Like, you know this team. So there's nothing surprising that Ohio State's throwing at you necessarily. I thought this was one of Hudson Card's lesser games because I thought there were too many instances in this game where he's just not making good decisions. The interception in the end zone, not a good decision. Multiple times where I thought there's a difference between getting sacked and taking a sack. Sacks are more often a quarterback stat than people give it credit for. They only look at it as in terms of like the offensive line gave up a sack. I think he's just holding the ball too much. There's times where he's got to just chuck it out of bounds and live to see another day. But right now, the margin for error is so small in this offense that I kind of get why you're trying to keep the play alive and get something downfield because you don't think you have another chance. Probably this might be your only chance to make anything happen. And I think you're right. Like, that's a perfect example though. Like, if you're a veteran quarterback, you have to know down and distance and juncture the game and just get the ball in the air and hope somebody can make a play or you get a PI like that. I mean, things can happen. So, it all comes back down to, though, like, we make a big deal out of like one or two things that happen during a game like that, because those are like the only scoring chances that this team summons at all. And I thought there was another game where the defense didn't play great. Defense gave up 16 explosive plays. We start counting the ones late in the game. And still, it kept Ohio State below its season average by like half a yard. Again, it's 14-0 late in the first half. The defense, I think, is doing its job in a lot of weeks more than the offense is still. And the offense just cannot reward the defense for the times when it does have success.
Yeah, and then vice versa, when the offense does something, which has, referenced maybe the Illinois fourth quarter or the second half there. And I know there was a defensive touchdown in that sequence too, but you give up or you get a chance to win the game, and Illinois marches right down the field and forces overtime in a matter of a few plays. It seems like they're just, and Brian Walters uses this term quite a bit, at least last season he did, complementary football.
Yeah.
The offense was on,
he still uses it a lot.
Yeah. And they never seem to be on the same page. And now, like, as you referenced in the post game, there's been several sequences this year where special teams has just killed this team with a crucial play that reversed the game.
I mean, special teams has had some moments too. It had some moments against Nebraska. You had the onside kick against Illinois. That's like one of the great plays of the season that just has completely gotten obscured because it didn't end up mattering at the end of the game in the result. But no, I think that special teams is a ongoing concern because it seems like something new pops up. Like, what is the deal with the return game right now where guys just don't, whether it was twice against Wisconsin, Dylan Thieneman dropped it, including the one that led to a touchdown. They had the kick off against Illinois where there was a miscommunication. The ball drops. Illinois goes in for a touchdown. Today, and it wasn't Thieneman that was back. It was Swinsky that was back. He's like goofing around with the ball and almost loses it on the first punt after they opened the game by forcing a punt, right? Like, it's all that stuff's happening. And then you get the punt block. So 45 points on the scoreboard, but 14 of them were Ohio State only had to go 8 yards after the punt block. And then there was a fumble by Reggie Love that Jack Sawyer picked up and ran in for a touchdown. So that's 14 points right there. And you're not going to beat Ohio State if you give up 31 points, most likely with this offense. But that offensive performance, that defensive performance, holding them to 31 is still better than what we've seen in a lot of other games.
By the way, Ohio State scored 32 against Oregon. So just for a reference point, and Oregon's the number 1 team in the country.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair thing to point out. Now, the way this game played out, they're putting in their scrubs or whatever, but still, Purdue puts in keeps its first team in against Ohio State's second team defense, drives down to the 21. It's already 38-0 or whatever it is at that point. Ryan Walters, when it stalls there, and there was almost a pass to Jamal Edrin for a first down, but it hits the ground. So they end up sending out the field goal unit again, maybe to give Spencer Porath some confidence, maybe to avoid the second shutout in 3 games, and he misses the other side on the field goal. It's just like, every decision is the wrong one. And I don't mean that as like they're making the wrong decision. I feel like they're just at this place where there is absolutely no margin for error. And you have to, as the way I wrote it after the game was, Ohio State has to play perfect to beat a team like Ohio State in its own stadium. Like, you have to play perfect and you have to get help. Like, that's the only way this talent disparity gets shrunk to the point where you win a game like this. But you shouldn't have to play perfect to cover a 38-point spread. Right. And that's almost what they have to do.
No, and I called it it's probably posted now, post game. I said Ryan Walters is in a no-win situation because last week he elects not to go for the field goal in overtime because he doesn't trust his kicker. And people chastise the coaching decision, which ultimately didn't matter because you gave up 40 yards in 2 plays to Northwestern. Right. But today he elects to go for the field goal, and people are like, why would you do that on 4th and goal from the 3? Take your chance at scoring a touchdown, and the field goal misses. And now I don't think that Ryan Walters probably is going to say, well, it was justified what I did last week, but in the minds of people who just saw him miss a chip shot field goal, maybe it is a little bit.
Well, I mean, in the way he described it after the game last week, I guess I get where he was coming from. I still would have gone for it just because, or I still would have kicked the field goal just because it would have forced force Northwestern to have to score.
Right.
I mean, it just from a game control standpoint, I'm probably doing that. And I think I don't know. This is the Big Ten. Like, if you don't have a guy who can kick a 38-yard field goal, what are you doing? Like, you've got multiple kickers on your team. Somebody's got to be able to kick a 38-yard field goal. So they've got 2 games left this year against teams that are right now en route to the college football playoff. And it's Penn State next week at home for Senior Day. And then it's Indiana in the Old Oaken Bucket game, Thanksgiving weekend. Indiana is leading Michigan, I believe it's 17-6 right now, late in the third. And it looks like Michigan might be kicking another field goal. Is that right? Can you read that?
17-6. Michigan's kicking a field goal as we speak. It's good.
Looks like it's good. So 17 minutes. You got a 1-touchdown game, Indiana winning. If they pull out that win, though, they'll still be en route towards the college football playoff. They have to come here and play Ohio State in a couple of weeks. But that's, again, 146-7 in against Notre Dame, Oregon, and Ohio State. You still got those 2 games left on your schedule. And as we talked all along about progress, that was like my buzzword of the offseason was like, where does this team show progress? And it has not showed progress anywhere. Like literally anywhere so far.
And you can't point to the schedule. It is a very difficult, challenging schedule for a team that is not very good, especially. But you don't see progress from Oregon to Ohio State, which are very comparable teams talent-wise, and what you've done in the 3 weeks or 4 weeks has been since those 2 games have happened.
I think it's just about reasonable expectations. And it would be an unreasonable expectation to say, well, Purdue's got to win 2 out of these 3, right? Notre Dame, Oregon, and Ohio State. Like, no, they don't. They might lose all. We thought before the season that I thought they would lose all 3 of those games. But you got to compete. You've got to make people look at the score at halftime and be like, oh, like Purdue's like, they're hanging around in that game a little bit, and you can't sustain it. They're more talented. It's a different tier, but like it's got to be competitive. And then you've got to win when you're punching your own weight. When you're in your own weight class, you do have to win some of those games. And right now, neither of those things are being accomplished. So I think these last 3 games, Michigan State's not an unwinnable game. It's a weird Friday night thing. They've got nothing to lose. That's a game that's within reach. Michigan State has played better than Purdue this year, no question. But I would not take that off the table as like a game that Purdue could somehow win. But these next, the bookends, the Penn State and the Indiana, like how much more competitively can you show than you've shown in these other 3 games against teams that might end up in the playoff?
Yeah. And, it's kind of, I felt like last season, and I know you were here covering Ohio State then, that at the end of the year, because progress was a thing then too, Purdue started to, and the opponents were different. It was Minnesota. It was Illinois was in there in the middle of the season somewhere. Indiana at the end, which was not Indiana as we see currently. And Purdue was winning games and scoring points and doing some good things. And you said going into the offseason, okay, there's a lot that happened at the end of the year that would lead you to believe with this coaching staff coming back and a lot of these guys coming back, and then the freshman class on top of that was coming in this year, that this thing could take off. And it's gone quite the different direction. And by take off, that may have meant a 4-8 season this year being, the next step in the evolution because of the schedule. But at least you say, hey, there's still excitement. You're generating buzz and people believe that this thing is moving forward. And instead, a lot of Purdue fans are probably about ready to jump off this train.
Well, I said it before the year, and I wasn't setting low expectations or making excuses ahead of time. I was just trying to be a realist. I was just trying to be pragmatic about it, that this team could go 4-8 again, and it can be considered progress because the schedule was that much tougher. And you're starting the year with maybe 4 or 5 losses just baked in because you're not as talented by a good stretch as some of these teams. But the progress hasn't been there in all those other matchups. So this is a way, though, to prove progress. It does matter how you lose games at some point. When you're going in and getting just thumped like this in every big game or every game against an elite opponent, it suggests something, especially when it's then accompanied by, it would also be offset if they were finding a way to win those other games. And I'll say again, like if they could just take last year, somebody out there with a computer program can probably do this. There's probably somebody who can like take last year's offensive performance and just apply it to this year's games. Would Purdue have like 3 or 4 wins right now? Probably 3. I think they would have still beat Oregon State or Nebraska, or they would have found a way to score earlier and flip that Illinois game. Like if they were just as mid as they were last year offensively, even with a bad defense or a porous defense, like I think they would be winning more right now. But this offense just continues to compete with almost nobody. And as long as that's the case, again, as long as they're just constantly playing from behind, it's tough to build any traction. So that's, I guess, my final word from Columbus. Anything else from you?
I mean, Devin Mockbee played well today, but aside from him,
I thought he did. I thought it was good that they kind of featured him early on. And I had said, I was doing a radio interview before the game and said, like, they've got a little bit of a blueprint here. They did it against Illinois, like establish the run, get the quarterback run involved there, and then make plays off of that, scheme up plays off of that. And teams have adapted to that after they did it against Illinois, but there's still something there that you could probably build. And again, like they sort of are doing it on the first drive, and then they take a sack, and then that foils the whole thing, and they have to punt. Like, it's just any one mistake just takes the offense off the field, and they've got to find more playmakers and more consistency to get away from that, because there's just no way to build traction the way that's going right now. So anyway, that's our sign off from Columbus. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back with Boilers Extra midweek. And again, check back Sunday. We'll see if there's more news on Daniel Jacobsen and where Purdue basketball goes next. Thanks a lot.